You've probably noticed this before. The people who care the least about what others think are usually the ones everyone ends up respecting the most. And the people who try the hardest to be liked, they're the ones nobody really takes seriously. It sounds backwards, but somehow the less attention you give the world, the more attention it gives back to you. So why does ignoring everyone work better than trying to win them over? Turns out it starts with something most people do without even thinking, trying to explain themselves. And that single habit is why explaining yourself only makes people trust you less. Then why staying silent gives you more control than any argument ever could. But the busiest, most successful people aren't ignoring less than everyone else, they're ignoring more. And by the end, you'll find the one habit that makes all of it feel completely effortless. And that's really what this comes down to, protecting your energy in a world that never stops demanding it. That's the kind of thing we break down here every week, so if that's something you want more of, you already know what to do. So here's where it actually starts. That question from a minute ago, why ignoring works better than trying to win people over, it comes down to one habit most of us do without even noticing. Explaining ourselves. Think about the last time someone questioned a decision you made. Maybe it was small, why you didn't answer a text right away, why you left early, why you said no to something. And almost automatically, you started explaining. Not because they demanded it. Just because staying quiet felt uncomfortable. Here's the strange part, though. The more you explain, the less people actually believe you need to. Explaining sends a signal, even if you don't mean it to. It says their opinion of you matters more than your own reason for doing something. And people can feel that shift, even if they couldn't tell you why. It's a little like watching someone over-apologize for something nobody was upset about. The apology doesn't make them look considerate. It makes them look unsure of themselves. Explaining works the same way. The longer the explanation, the smaller you start to seem in the room. And this is where it gets interesting. Respect isn't built by proving you had a good reason. It's built by acting like you didn't need permission in the first place. Every time you skip the explanation, you're quietly telling people, and yourself, that your decisions don't require their approval to be valid. That's not the same as being cold or dismissive. It's just a different relationship with your own choices. Most people spend so much energy managing what others think of their decisions that they never get around to just making them. The explaining becomes a substitute for confidence, a way to feel like you're still in control of how you're seen, even while you're quietly asking for permission you don't actually need. Which is why the people who seem the most respected aren't always the smartest or most successful in the room. They're just the ones who stopped narrating themselves. They made the choice, and let the choice speak on its own. And once you notice that pattern, you start noticing something else too, how much of what we call communication is actually just self-defense. Which raises a harder question. If explaining yourself is quietly working against you, is staying completely silent any better? Or does silence come with its own kind of cost? So that's the question we ended on. If explaining yourself works against you, does staying silent actually help, or does it come with its own cost? Turns out, silence works completely differently than most people expect. When you explain yourself, you're handing someone material to argue with. Every reason you give becomes something they can pick apart, question, or twist. But when you say nothing, there's nothing to argue against. The conversation just stops having anywhere to go. Picture two people in a disagreement. One keeps defending their point, offering reason after reason. The other just listens, nods, and doesn't engage. Who actually looks more in control? It's almost never the one still talking. The person who keeps arguing looks like they need to win. The person who stays quiet looks like they've already decided the outcome doesn't depend on winning at all. This is where a question a lot of people ask actually makes sense: how do you ignore people who hurt you? And the honest answer is, you don't ignore the hurt. You ignore the invitation to respond to it. Someone says something designed to get a reaction, and your silence isn't you pretending it didn't land. It's you refusing to hand them proof that it did. That distinction matters, because silence gets misunderstood as weakness. It's not. Weakness is needing the last word. Silence is choosing not to need it. Here's the part most people miss, though. Silence only works if it's genuine. If you're silently fuming, biting your tongue, waiting for the moment you can finally say what you really think, that's not silence. That's a delayed argument. Real silence comes from actually letting go of the need to be understood in that exact moment. It's the difference between holding your tongue and having nothing left to prove. Think about someone who never raises their voice, never gets pulled into back-and-forth arguments, and somehow still seems to get the outcome they want more often than the people yelling across the room. It's not luck. Arguments run on energy, and the person who refuses to feed it usually walks away with more control than the person who kept fighting for it. And this connects to something bigger than just conflict. Every time you resist the urge to defend, correct, or respond, you're training yourself to separate your sense of self from other people's opinions of you. That's not something you're born with. It's something you build, one unanswered argument at a time. Which brings up something worth sitting with. If silence works this well in arguments, in small everyday friction, what happens when you apply that same restraint to your entire life? Not just in disagreements, but in how much attention you give the world in general. So that's the real question. What happens when you take that same restraint, the one you just saw work in small arguments, and apply it to everything demanding your attention? Here's something you'll notice if you actually study people who get a lot done. They're not ignoring less than everyone else. They're ignoring more. And it's not because they have some special willpower the rest of us don't. It's because they've made ignoring a system, not a struggle. Think about how most people handle their day. A notification comes in, and they check it. A colleague brings up something unrelated to what they're working on, and they engage with it. Someone has an opinion about a decision they already made, and they stop to address it. None of these things are big on their own. But stack them up across a day, and most of your attention gets spent reacting to things you never chose to focus on in the first place. The busiest, most in-demand people don't have more hours than you do. What they actually have is a much smaller list of things they're willing to respond to. Everything else, the noise, the opinions, the minor requests, the distractions dressed up as urgent, gets ignored by default, not by exception. It's not that they're too important to notice those things. It's that responding to them was never part of the plan. And here's a question worth asking honestly: why does ignoring people make you dangerous? Not dangerous like a threat. Dangerous like unpredictable to control. Someone who reacts to everything is easy to manipulate. You know exactly which buttons to press to get their attention or throw off their focus. But someone who's trained themselves to only respond to what actually matters to them. You can't bait that person. You can't distract them into a debate, guilt them into a meeting, or provoke them into defending themselves. That unpredictability, that refusal to be pulled off course, is exactly what makes them harder to move. This is different from being closed off or antisocial. It's closer to how a good editor works. They're not against ideas. They're just constantly deciding what doesn't make the final cut, so the parts that remain actually mean something. Apply that same editing instinct to your attention, and suddenly most of what used to eat your day just quietly falls away. The uncomfortable part is realizing how much of your own busyness has been self-inflicted, not by other people demanding things from you, but by your own willingness to respond to things nobody actually required you to respond to. Which leads somewhere most people don't expect. If ignoring the noise clears this much space in your day, what does it start to cost you when the thing you're ignoring is something people actually want from you? Where's the line between protecting your attention and just avoiding people altogether? That question about the line between protecting your attention and avoiding people altogether, hold on to that for a second, because there's a piece missing first. And it has to do with why so many people struggle to draw that line in the first place. Most people don't ignore others because they've decided their attention is limited. They keep responding, keep engaging, keep saying yes, because somewhere along the way they learned that being liked was the safer option. And once that becomes the default, every interaction quietly turns into an audition. Will this person approve of me? Will they think less of me if I say no? Will they still like me if I don't respond right away? It doesn't feel like approval seeking when you're in it. It feels like being considerate. Being a good friend. Being easy to work with. But underneath all of that, there's a cost most people never actually calculate. Every yes you give out of fear of disappointing someone is a yes taken away from something you actually wanted to do. Every opinion you soften to keep the peace is a version of your actual opinion you didn't get to have. It adds up slowly, which is exactly why it's so easy to miss. Nobody wakes up one day and decides to spend their life optimizing for other people's comfort. It happens one small accommodation at a time, until the pattern becomes who you think you are. Here's what makes this especially tricky. Seeking approval usually works, at least in the short term. People do like you more when you agree with them, say yes to their requests, and avoid friction. So the behavior gets rewarded just enough to keep repeating it. The problem only shows up later, when you realize the approval you've been collecting was never really about you. It was about how well you performed for the people watching. And this is where the two paths actually split. Ignoring people who don't add value to your life isn't about writing people off. It's about noticing which relationships are asking you to perform, and which ones actually make room for who you are without a performance attached. One drains you slowly and calls it connection. The other costs you nothing, because there was never an audition to begin with. Once you start seeing that difference clearly, something shifts. You stop asking, will they approve of this, before you make decisions. You start asking whether the decision is actually yours to begin with. Which brings up something worth sitting with before we go further. If seeking approval is this costly, and ignoring people is this powerful, where exactly do you draw that line without becoming someone who just shuts everyone out? So where is that line? Between protecting your attention and shutting people out completely? It actually comes down to something most people never learn on purpose, the difference between a wall and a boundary. A wall keeps everyone out, no matter who they are or what they bring. A boundary is more selective. It lets in what's actually good for you, and quietly closes the door on what isn't. And the thing is, most people never build boundaries deliberately. They either let everyone in and end up exhausted, or they get hurt enough times that they shut down completely and call it self-protection. There's actually a specific question worth asking here. How do you gain power by ignoring people who don't add value to your life? And the honest answer starts with noticing something uncomfortable. Not every relationship in your life is actually adding something. Some are neutral. Some quietly take more than they give. And most of us keep engaging with those anyway, out of habit, guilt, or just not wanting to be the one who pulled away first. Ignoring, in this sense, isn't cruelty. It's just accuracy. It's recognizing that your time, attention, and emotional energy are finite, and treating them that way instead of pretending they're unlimited. The person who never learns to do this ends up spread so thin across everyone else's needs that there's nothing left over for their own. Think about someone who's always available, answers every message immediately, agrees to every request, shows up for every version of themselves that other people expect. It looks generous from the outside. But look closer, and you'll usually find someone who's quietly running on empty, because nothing about their attention was ever protected in the first place. Boundaries work differently. They're not built by announcing them or explaining them to people, which is something we already covered. The explaining just invites debate. Boundaries get built by consistently, quietly, not engaging with what doesn't serve you. No dramatic conversation. No ultimatum. Just a steady pattern of what gets your energy and what doesn't. And this is where the power actually comes from. Not from confrontation. From consistency. People recalibrate how they treat you based on what you consistently respond to. The moment you stop reacting to something, it stops being an effective way to get your attention. That's not manipulation on your part, it's just cause and effect. The uncomfortable part is that some people will notice the shift and push back, testing whether the boundary is real. That's usually the moment people give up on boundaries entirely, right when it mattered most to hold them. Which raises the next question. If holding a boundary means people will sometimes push back and get louder, what do you do when the person testing you refuses to just go away? That's the real test, isn't it? Someone pushes back on your boundary, gets louder, maybe even escalates. What do you do when ignoring them doesn't make them go away? Here's the shift that changes everything. You stop trying to make them go away, and you focus entirely on what you do with your own reaction instead. Because that's the part you actually control. Their behavior was never yours to manage. Your response always was. This is where a lot of people get it backwards. They think power means controlling how others act, getting someone to stop pushing, stop testing, stop escalating. But you can't force that. What you can control is whether their push gets the reaction it's designed to get. And that's really the question underneath all of this. Why does ignoring people actually give you more power? It's because every reaction you give someone is information. It tells them exactly what works. Get loud enough, and you'll get a response. Push hard enough, and the boundary bends. The moment you react, even in frustration, you've confirmed that the tactic is effective. The moment you don't, the tactic just stops paying off. Think about it like a slot machine. People keep pulling the lever because sometimes, unpredictably, it pays out. If it never paid out, they'd stop pulling almost immediately. Your reactions work the same way. Inconsistent silence teaches people to keep trying. Consistent silence teaches them there's nothing left to try for. This is also why the angriest, loudest response usually isn't actually powerful, even though it feels like it in the moment. It feels like taking control. But what it's actually doing is handing someone the exact outcome they were fishing for, proof that they can still get under your skin. Real power looks almost boring from the outside. It's the person who hears something designed to provoke them and just doesn't take the bait. Not because they didn't notice it. Because they decided it wasn't worth spending themselves on. And there's a quieter cost to reacting that most people never calculate. Every time you respond to provocation, you're spending energy on someone else's agenda instead of your own. You're not advancing anything you actually care about. You're just managing the fallout of letting someone else set the terms of your attention. Which is why the people who seem the calmest under pressure aren't necessarily the ones who feel the least. They've just learned that feeling something and reacting to it are two completely different decisions. But this brings up something that's easy to get wrong. If not reacting is this powerful, where's the line between staying composed and just letting people walk over you without ever pushing back at all? So where actually is that line? Between staying composed and just letting people walk over you? This is the part that trips up almost everyone who first tries to apply any of this, because from the outside, ignoring and avoiding can look identical. But they come from completely different places. Avoiding comes from fear. It's not engaging with something because you're afraid of what might happen if you do, the conflict, the discomfort, the possibility of being disliked. Ignoring is different. Ignoring comes from a decision. It's not engaging with something because you've already weighed it and decided it doesn't deserve your energy. Same outward behavior. Completely different internal engine driving it. Here's a simple way to tell them apart. Avoidance usually comes with a knot in your stomach. There's a tension to it, a sense of relief when it's over, because some part of you was hoping the situation would just resolve itself without you having to face it. Ignoring, done properly, doesn't carry that tension. There's nothing to dread, because there was nothing to run from in the first place. You're not hiding from the interaction. You simply decided it wasn't a priority. This distinction matters because avoidance actually costs you power, while real ignoring builds it. When you avoid something out of fear, the thing still controls you, it just controls you from a distance instead of up close. You're still organizing your behavior around it. You're still letting it dictate what you do and don't do. That's not detachment. That's just delayed engagement, dressed up as peace. Think about someone who dodges a difficult conversation for weeks, rearranging their schedule, taking different routes, going quiet in group chats just to sidestep one topic. That's not someone who's stopped caring. That's someone who cares so much they've reorganized their entire life around not dealing with it. Compare that to someone who hears the same difficult topic come up, decides it's not worth their energy right now, and simply moves on without a second thought. One person is being controlled. The other is exercising choice. This is also where letting people walk over you actually comes from, not from ignoring too much, but from avoiding too much. The pushover isn't someone who ignores provocation. It's someone who's too afraid of conflict to ever actually decide anything, so they default to going along with whatever keeps the peace in the moment. Real ignoring requires a decision. Avoidance requires none at all, it just requires staying quiet and hoping it passes. Once you can feel that difference from the inside, ignoring stops being something you do to protect yourself from people. It becomes something closer to just knowing what's actually worth your time. And that's the part most people never quite land on their own, knowing, in the moment, exactly what's worth engaging with and what isn't. Which is exactly the piece that ties everything you've heard so far together. So where actually is that line? Between staying composed and just letting people walk over you? This is the part that trips up almost everyone who first tries to apply any of this, because from the outside, ignoring and avoiding can look identical. But they come from completely different places. Avoiding comes from fear. It's not engaging with something because you're afraid of what might happen if you do, the conflict, the discomfort, the possibility of being disliked. Ignoring is different. Ignoring comes from a decision. It's not engaging with something because you've already weighed it and decided it doesn't deserve your energy. Same outward behavior. Completely different internal engine driving it. Here's a simple way to tell them apart. Avoidance usually comes with a knot in your stomach. There's a tension to it, a sense of relief when it's over, because some part of you was hoping the situation would just resolve itself without you having to face it. Ignoring, done properly, doesn't carry that tension. There's nothing to dread, because there was nothing to run from in the first place. You're not hiding from the interaction. You simply decided it wasn't a priority. This distinction matters because avoidance actually costs you power, while real ignoring builds it. When you avoid something out of fear, the thing still controls you, it just controls you from a distance instead of up close. You're still organizing your behavior around it. You're still letting it dictate what you do and don't do. That's not detachment. That's just delayed engagement, dressed up as peace. Think about someone who dodges a difficult conversation for weeks, rearranging their schedule, taking different routes, going quiet in group chats just to sidestep one topic. That's not someone who's stopped caring. That's someone who cares so much they've reorganized their entire life around not dealing with it. Compare that to someone who hears the same difficult topic come up, decides it's not worth their energy right now, and simply moves on without a second thought. One person is being controlled. The other is exercising choice. This is also where letting people walk over you actually comes from, not from ignoring too much, but from avoiding too much. The pushover isn't someone who ignores provocation. It's someone who's too afraid of conflict to ever actually decide anything, so they default to going along with whatever keeps the peace in the moment. Real ignoring requires a decision. Avoidance requires none at all, it just requires staying quiet and hoping it passes. Once you can feel that difference from the inside, ignoring stops being something you do to protect yourself from people. It becomes something closer to just knowing what's actually worth your time. And that's the part most people never quite land on their own, knowing, in the moment, exactly what's worth engaging with and what isn't. Which is exactly the piece that ties everything you've heard so far together. So really, it all comes back to one shift. Explaining less. Reacting less. Not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped handing your attention to things that were never yours to carry in the first place. Silence replaced the need to win. Boundaries replaced the need to please. And somewhere in there, ignoring stopped being a defense and became a filter, one honest question standing between you and everything demanding a piece of your day. For the next 24 hours, try it once. The next time something pulls at you to respond, pause, and just ask, is this actually mine to carry? But here's where that filter gets tricky. Because, is this mine to carry, works on other people's noise, until you turn it on your own goals. The project that got harder than you expected. In that exact moment, quitting doesn't feel like giving up. It feels like relief. Like you were never meant to carry it in the first place. So why does stopping feel like the smartest decision you've ever made? Because somewhere in the middle of that relief, there's a decision waiting to be made, the kind that means you never quit again. That decision is exactly what's sitting on your screen right now. Click it and find out.